right. Well, good morning, everybody. It is 9 o'clock on the West Coast, and so we're going to start our webinar on time. We're so excited to have everybody here again for this awesome webinar. So just a quick announcement. You've got Jeff Piper in the room, Amy Atkinson, Dr. Jim Williams, and Cindy Kirk from the Palau team. As one of our guest presenters, as you can see in the PowerPoint, is Jeff Kreiser. But just a couple announcements real quick. Hopefully everybody got the email about the new website, so check that out. Great things on there from resources and collaborative events, as well as some of the conferences that we're doing this summer. As me and my family are traveling around the country to Chicago and Dallas and Carlsbad and Oakland, and then later on in October in Nashville, we'll be doing one-day conferences called Refuel Summits. So be sure to look at the website for more information about those. We'd love to see you at one or more of those. And also, again, just to underscore the new website, you can update your information on that. And so contact us if you have any questions. And speaking of questions, during the webinar, in the chat forum, you can post your questions because there's a couple breaks in the webinar. We're going to field questions. And so if you have any questions, feel free to post those, and Amy will field that. For some reason that's not working, go ahead and email it to Amy, and we'll get to as many questions as we can today. Well, again, we're so excited to have Cindy Kirk. Cindy's part of the Palau staff. She leads the City Serve as the director and VP here at Palau over that department. She also serves on the Palau Association cabinet. She's one of our executive leaders here at the team, and just very talented, and we're very blessed to have Cindy as part of the Palau family and team. We also have on the line today Jeff Kreiser from Sacramento. He is the executive director of ACTS, which is dedicated to advancing city transformation strategies in the greater Sacramento region. Both experts in this area. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Cindy so we can get started.
Well, good morning. It's great to be able to talk to all of you about what we do here and how God is working in our cities. And at first I would start with just defining a gospel movement. There's different ways that's defined, but we define it as a united, sustainable effort by churches and cultural leaders to transform their city by meeting critical needs and sharing the love and message of Jesus Christ. And so there's a lot of things that fall under the gospel movement umbrella. So we actually have what we call the core attributes of a gospel movement to help you understand what those core attributes are. It's a gospel-centered, church-driven, disciple-led, and city-focused. So under each of those, as you can imagine, there's lots of different components. The gospel-centered, of course, is probably where most of you in your work of being an evangelist spend a lot of time, obviously, in proclaiming the good news. And we really want to talk, Jeff is going to take over and talk about kind of the theological foundation of the gospel movement and try to find that balance between word and deed. Hey, Jeff, I think you might be muted.
Well, that would be better to not. So
There you go. There you go.
So I'll say what I said before, and that is that it's really great to be able to share with you today, especially evangelist to evangelist, in terms of my heart for ministry and the work that I've done, both for evangelism and for starting new churches. That's where my passion is. We are working hard in the Sacramento region, and the only reason to work hard is we want people to respond to the invitation of our God to relationship with Him on this earth and forevermore through Jesus Christ. So when we talk about movements being gospel-centered, city movements being gospel-centered, of gospel is the understanding of the good news that there is a God who exists. There's a God who calls us into relationship with Himself, a God who created the world, created humanity, and created cities, created order through His image being born in those people that He created. And so we believe that the good news of Jesus Christ, as people receive it, are going to transform people internally, within themselves, spiritually being born again, born anew, and that it's going to change them externally in terms of the way they live, what their lifestyle is, and it's going to change them eternally because now they're no longer dead but alive, and alive forevermore in Christ. So we're excited about the idea of keeping the gospel at the very center of everything that happens. I think one of the emphases, and we'll talk later, is on compassionate service. But that compassionate service done in the name of Jesus is gospel expressed through our actions. And we need to both demonstrate but also communicate the love of Christ. Now, the theological foundation, very simply, is the birth of the church as those disciples waited in Jerusalem for the promise that Jesus said would come, the empowerment of the Holy Spirit to be his witnesses, to be the witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. That is where the birth of the church took place. As the Holy Spirit came, it pushed people from a room where they were praying together into the streets. And in the streets, they were proclaiming a message. And we have that contained in Acts chapter 2 in Peter's sermon and Peter's message, which brought a response, which birthed the first church. So the gospel is proclamation, but then it was also demonstration. In Acts 2:42 to 47, we see that the description of that early church wasn't just internal, wasn't just the change by coming into faith and into community with others in faith, but they were demonstrating that change that happened in their life by how they did business, by how they cared for each other, what was happening in their families, what was happening on their property, and what was affecting all of Jerusalem, so that there came a time when they were before the religious authorities that they said, you know, you've filled all Jerusalem with this teaching. And when they filled all Jerusalem with the teaching, it wasn't only the messaging that was going on, but it was these lives that were being lived dramatically differently within Jerusalem, because Jesus Christ had risen from the dead and was showing himself in that. So that really becomes then the model, whether you're in Minneapolis or Austin, Texas, or Atlanta or Oklahoma City or San Diego or Sacramento, is that gospel transformed people transform a city. They fill that city with the message and the knowledge of Jesus Christ, and they fill it with people who are living so differently and so beautifully and so winsomely and with such compassion and care for all peoples that the common good is raised throughout the city, and especially for those who are on the margin. So when we say gospel-centered, church-driven, it's going to be driven by the local church, the commitment of local congregations cooperating together as the church of a city, corporately, letting the gospel come through all of those who are then distributing the grace of God in manifest ways, in a multitude of ways throughout the city. So that's just a little bit of balance of word and deed together. And as evangelists, we're focused on the message, making sure people hear, understand, and have the opportunity to respond to the gospel message. That gospel message delivered by a transformed and transforming people, you know, that brings sweeping acts of hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands coming to know Jesus more quickly because of the remarkable lives followers of Jesus are living in. Cindy, those other two aspects are important as well, but why don't we stop here just for a minute if anybody wants to put in a question in terms of the idea of gospel-centered and church-driven.
Okay, let's go to the question panel. If we have any questions. Let's see. One of the things that came up, Cindy and Jeff, is, you know, what's the difference between a convener and a practitioner? Can you differentiate between those two?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer that. One of the pieces that we get asked about, you know, our strength here at the Louis Powell Association, especially here in Portland, and other cities where we go, is the ability to kind of convene the local leaders and have them come together and really kind of look at this big vision for their city. And so we've seen that in the cities where we've been, like Jeff mentioned, Sacramento, San Diego, Houston. We just finished a festival in Alaska. So that ability to convene the leaders and kind of cast a bigger vision where the church is united and serving in their city and what that looks like to transform the city. And like Jeff was saying, but cities transform through people. So that's we're not really trying to transform the city. We're really trying to transform the people of the city. And that really translates to the city. So whereas a practitioner, and this is kind of gets into kind of the social service side of things, a practitioner is somebody that is in the trenches serving people day in and day out. That's, you think about the rescue missions, some of the, food pantries, those kinds of things. In the social services side, they consider themselves, those are the practitioners. They're direct service providers day in and day out, meeting needs. Some are ministries, some are not. Some proclaim the good news, some don't. And so that's kind of a distinction, especially if you never really have been on the practitioner side, to understand kind of that difference between here's a convening role and here's really a practitioner role. So, Jeff, do you have anything to add on that kind of gives clarity?
Well, I think that's a great definition, and I would say that what's important to know is that both are equally important. And so it's not elevating one or the other. The person with convening power is the person with authority. They may have positional authority. They may have relational authority that they have. They've built authority through a legacy of trust building over time. It's the when Cindy talks, people listen kind of thing. So, yeah. where if some people to a meeting, they show up. And that's built through relationship and position and power and influence in the city. Practitioners may or may not have that ability, but they are people who are in their own lane on the highway, their own place in the movement, doing remarkable work. And I would say is a differentiation between the two of them, but equally celebrated.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, I'm sure more questions will be percolating as we go on, so let's go ahead and keep moving on the presentation.
All right, Jeff, do you want to talk a little bit before we head into the kind of the city focus and disciple-led, and this might kind of intersect with both of those. We've talked about the gospel center component of gospel movements. The church-driven, one of the things here at the Louis Palau Association that is part of our DNA is with, through, and for the local church. And so, that's really critically important to understand when we're talking about what's happening in the cities. We think about what are the core entities in cities, the faith community and the government, the schools. A lot of times those are kind of the core entities. So it's, we talk about to work with, through, and for the local church. And since Jeff, you actually came from being a pastor at a local church into this work of city transformation, I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
That's great. And I'd like to share maybe two main thoughts on that. One is that the concept of that needs to percolate through pastors in every city movement is the idea of a church or a community church. So many of you might be living and ministering in metropolis type of areas that have many sub-communities around. So in Sacramento, we have a city south of Sacramento called Elk Grove, but it's very distinctly in Sacramento County and part of the Sacramento Capital Region. But those people who live in Elk Grove and the churches, the congregations in Elk Grove are identify with Elk Grove. So we're working on cultivating here, that's I think very important idea for you to understand, is that there's one church, many life-giving congregations in that community, in that city. So those congregations cooperating together are really the Church of Elk Grove that is working together for gospel sharing and gospel showing in that particular city. And the more that individual pastors can understand that idea, and as pastors catch that idea and share it with each other, it just quickly becomes a huge gain, because now there's going to be the collective impact of those congregations working together. The second thing I want to share in terms of church-driven is the idea that the local church, and by that now I mean one church, many life-giving congregations working together or community, are those that are gospel-centered congregations. And you'll have to find the language that works maybe in your area. But in California, where I'm working, the idea of faith-based or faith community or faith-based work has come to mean almost anything. And if we're staying true to those who believe in the core theological, historical, creedal concepts of Christianity and are practicing those within their church. Now that can be a very broad number of kinds of congregations, denominations, and that kind of thing. But Christ-honoring, biblical authority of the Word of God type of churches, we call them gospel-centered or gospel-focused churches, because it immediately brings a focus on Jesus Christ, who lived, who died. That has really, really helped us identify those congregations that can work together on prayer, on service, on gospel sharing, on starting new ministry and new churches to reach people who have not yet been engaged with the gospel. And that is really what drives it. And as there's a cooperative spirit, a collaborative spirit among those kinds of congregations, things move quickly, exponentially quickly forward for the gospel in those particular communities.
That's great. A couple of things that you said that I want to comment on that makes me think about some of the things we get asked about a lot. And we do get asked about that because, from the secular side, when they say the faith-based community, it's just one big brushstroke of anybody of any religion. So when we get asked about things like, who's at the table? One of the things we say is that, our relationship is with the evangelical churches. That's who we know, that's who we have a like-mindedness, and that's who we have the ability to convene. We're not necessarily, when it comes to serving the city, we're not really trying to exclude anybody. I mean, anybody can serve the city. I don't care if, you can go work for United Way and serve the city. But when we're really trying to convene the churches, in our mind, we are talking about the evangelical churches. We don't apologize for that. We just clarify that that's who our partners are. And somebody else can convene and have partners. So you don't have to have every single person at the table per se in that conversation. And so we get asked that a lot, and it's something that it's just, I think people actually just in providing clarity, they're okay with that. They don't want to feel like it's kind of a bait and switch. They do want to know who's in the nation. And there are other conversations where it is very inclusive. It includes everybody. But really on that convening side, who do we convene? When we really pull together churches, it is the evangelical churches that we're really convening.
Yeah, good. We had a question come in. Maybe you guys could feel it right now, and I'm sure it's common with a lot of our partner evangelists. Is the evangelist the convener or the practitioner or both? Yeah.
Yeah, that is a good question. Well, you can be both. Definitely. It kind of probably depends on where you're going and what you're doing exactly. I mean, the practitioner in my mind is somebody who is fairly rooted in that city, who is probably doing that kind of knowing that city all the time. Whereas if you're kind of coming in and serving alongside, you'll kind of have maybe a period of being a practitioner. But in my mind, especially, and Jeff, you can kind of probably put some input into this. The people that are doing this week in and week out, they feel like we're the practitioners, and they are. They're the experts. That's what they do. And so when we go to serve alongside them, we have to go in with a really humble approach of saying, yeah, we want to come in, and because you're doing the heavy lifting, as we say. I mean, that is heavy lifting. They're doing the hard work. how can we come alongside and support them in that role?
Yeah. I would say, too, that if you have a robust understanding of Ephesians 4, where it says that God gave some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, pastors, and teachers, and then all that comes after that, I think where a problem can come sometime for us as evangelists is we have such an urgency about heaven and hell and about the immediacy of the need of bringing the gospel to people that we don't step back and understand that God has an order of leaders that he has put in cities, in communities, not just within congregations, but for a city church. And as evangelists, if we understand our role and we come at it respecting and talking about the relationship, say, between the evangelist and the pastor, saying, we do this well, you do that well, they need to be shepherded, cared for, discipled, taught the Word of God, and each of us in our role together are able to have that transformative experience for the maturation of the body of Christ in a city, for the reaching of the entire city with the message of the gospel. If you come at it, I think it's not so much about gifting, which would make you the practitioner, but it's that relational maturity and that honoring one another and that honoring of those other gifts and their essential cooperative spirit among those gifts to get that gospel movement rolling in the city, because we need the people who are breaking the new ground and are the elders in the gate and who speak the truth and who are shepherding and discipling and teaching. It's all of us working together for gospel movement to move ahead. Again, when we talk about church-driven, within church, churches are led by leaders, and those leaders have those particular gifts. Each of those gifts have a practitioner component to them. Any one of those leadership giftings could become a convener. You, as an evangelist, can be a convener, but it's going to require relational maturity, patience, honor, understanding, celebrating the mercy and the care of pastors, the thoroughness of teachers, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to encourage you, as an evangelist, you can be that convener. It has a lot to do with your relational capacity and your ability to affirm and build up the whole of the work of the leadership of the church.
Good. That's good. All right. Well, keep your questions coming in, but we'll get back to the presentation because the clock is not our friend. So, Cindy.
Okay. Well, one of the things that we talk about is with the gospel movement being a movement of movements. When you look at a city and you go into a city and you see what's going on, there is a lot of things going on, whether it's on the church planting side, on the prayer side, on the reconciliation side, on the serving side, and so you really have to have, when you're talking about a gospel movement in a city, you really have to have a very holistic view of all that's happening. It's a movement of movements, and so that's one thing that's really kind of important to have that spirit of discernment about where you feel God is calling you in one of those areas. And there's a lot of intersection in those areas. That's the one thing that we're seeing here in Portland, and we'll talk more about the Portland story, is that there's great intersection amongst those movements. And that's when you really get, I think, that power of what's happening in a city is when there actually does start to be an intersection amongst those movements. And so that's where we are in that. Should we go ahead and move into the city-focused area? Is that what we want to do?
Sounds great.
Okay. Naturally, since we're kind of moving in that direction, we might as well. So we actually just came from Alaska. We just had a big festival, which was fantastic, and God did some amazing work. It's really, now as we're going into cities, it really is this sense of how can we see the festival as a catalyst for a long-term movement. We had that mindset also in Sacramento. That was really what with Jeff and the team there. Jeff was part of our follow-up for the festival, and really having a vision about what this looks like over the long term. And Jeff will talk more about the Sacramento story after I talk about the Portland story. So as we're talking about collaborating with city leaders, how do we meet with city leaders? How do we discern what the needs of the city are? So city-focused and disciple-led, equipping and letting loose the disciples with passion and ideas. Two different areas. At the core of all of this is relationship. At the core of this is how do you come alongside those and form authentic relationships and ongoing partnerships. And I think the sense of the Spirit is with that we just saw in Alaska is that they feel that your heart is also for their city. So when you're going into a new city and they have a lot going on, it's critically important that they feel like your vested interest is in the ongoing transformation of their city. And so by building up those relationships and having a heart for the city is critically important as we're going in and serving cities. So that really requires us to have a spirit of being a learner and being a joiner to somebody else's. And a lot of times that goes against a little bit those that we like to do things independently. We like to start new things. So we really have to, and I know Jeff just brought up Ephesians 4, which was great, that be completely and humble and gentle, be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. That is so critical. Just being able to go into a city and have a spirit of already really just saying, what is God doing in this city? We're in Portland, and most of you are probably familiar with the Portland story. Starting from 2008 when we have the festival here in Portland, we've just continued to see unity grow, a love for the city, the churches continuing to collaborate and serve the city, and a lot of that has been by building that relationship amongst the pastors and also a very humble approach with the city leaders, the practitioners, a humble approach with the people that we have. This is a great example. We have an organization here in Portland that has served homeless years. And when we met with them about 2 years ago, and we said, hey, we've got some churches that are really interested in finding out what your organization does, the founding executive director said, we've never worked with churches. They're the largest organization serving homeless teens in the state of Oregon, and he flat out said, we've never worked with churches. And so that approach going in, you have to go in with saying, we need to learn, we want to come alongside, how can we support you in what you're doing? And so continuously really going in with that sense of how can I learn from those that are doing that. So here at CityServe for Portland, our mission is to love and serve the city in the name of Christ. And our strategy of doing that is connecting people, entities, and resources for a greater kingdom impact. And I have found in the work of doing CityServe, working with a lot of people on the secular side, whether it's in the school district, whether it's in the mayor's office, whether it's a business leader, I sense that they like the clarity of coming in when we're saying we're here to serve in the name of Christ. We follow the rules. We know if it's an event where we're serving a school and we're not allowed to proselytize, we're going to follow the rules. We know that, but we also want to provide clarity in saying when the time comes for that conversation, we want you to know that we're going to talk about Jesus. And so, you know, in presenting that of saying, you know, that's why we're here to serve. So that's a real important element of having, I think, just a real transparency up front about why we're serving. And there's a respect and a level that happens in that transparency of saying, you know, we both want to know where we're coming from, building up that relationship. And through that comes also, I'd like to just say, that intentionality in that relationship. Of going back and connecting with that person. Are there any issues that you're concerned about? How can we address these issues? And after, if there's something that happens, just being able to have that open conversation and them really sensing your heart for their city, your heart of humbleness. Those are really critical components in this work. And so I just wanted to stress those things. So a little bit about the Portland story then. In 2008, when the festival happened, through our conversations with the city, we basically chose certain areas of service. Those have actually changed over the years. There's been some that have kind of come and gone, so to speak, just as churches are mobilizing their congregants and what people are interested in. But the one area, we have hunger and poverty, health and wellness, homelessness, human trafficking, foster care, gang and street violence, and school partnerships. The foster care initiative is just over the last 18 months has taken off, and I'll talk some more about that in a minute. The school partnerships are something that is resonating across the country. When we're talking to other city leaders about ways that they want to engage in the city, the doors have been open in that area more than we're seeing in any other area. Not that it's always easy. Sometimes, and I hear about some resistance on occasion of partnerships trying to be built, and we have to trust sometimes God is not opening the door as we'd hoped. But the School Partnership Network has been just such momentum that we're seeing here in Portland. We have about 250 schools now that have a church 400. Now those partnerships can look quite different from one another. Some of them are very extensive. The church is in serving every single week. Some of them are once a year where they're doing a beautification project. So we have a couple of things on our website, which is the cityservepdx.org, that are resources if you're interested in learning more about school partnerships. One of them is how to get started, and it identifies, how do you identify a potential school partner? What do you do when you meet with a key person from the school? And just kind of walks you through how to get started with a school partnership. That's a downloadable PDF from our website. There's another one also that is what is a partner, and just kind of helping you define what a partner might be. And again, those can be several different levels of types of partnership. And as we always say with this partnership, it's much better to under-promise and over-deliver. So sometimes we go in with really high aspirations, and we talk about a lot of great things, and then it doesn't come through. It's better to actually set the bar really low and go in and just say, we don't really know what we're capable of doing. We want to do a lot, but we want to set the bar kind of low and then kind of blow them away with what you can get done. So that's a much better approach than over-promising and under-delivering. So we continue to see how these projects are growing, these relationships between the churches and schools are growing. I just had a pastor actually text me yesterday talking about how they're really trying to be more intentional in building relationship with the families at the school. One of the ways that they're doing that is they help the school with Thanksgiving baskets, and then they're continuing relationships with those families throughout the school year and seeing those, so adopted families at Thanksgiving with helping them with food baskets, but then wanting to build relationships throughout the year with those same families. So there's lots of different, the one thing that I think has really been a catalyst for the school partnerships is the fact that there's a very broad spectrum for ways for people to volunteer. It can be once a year and throwing around bark mulch and pulling weeds. It can be once a week sitting down with a student and reading with them, having lunch with them. It can be, helping the school with different types of events. So that's where we've seen just a huge amount of momentum because there's lots of opportunities there. And they're a core part of our community. It's a core part of serving for the common good. So we're excited about what we continue to see here in Portland with the school partnerships. And one thing that I will share about that too that's really been, again, a catalyst, I think, for opening the door for these partnerships is at the highest level. We have the support of the superintendents across the Metro District. And so for the superintendents to say, yes, we support our churches having faith-based partners has been absolutely phenomenal. So that's really opened the doors, and so we've actually really kind of been intentional about forming relationships with the superintendents at that larger level. So that's really helped move that forward. Another part of the story here in Portland that's just been unbelievable is and a lot of you may have heard about this, but this started in 2008 with South Lake Church adopted Roosevelt High School. At the time, Roosevelt High School was the most school in need, a high school with the most needs in the city of Portland, right in the North Portland area. It was a high school that was actually slated to be closed, had just tremendous amount of issues. And South Lake in 2008 decided to go in and do a beautification project for the school, and went in. They ended up with about 1,200 volunteers showing up on a single day, and formed the school from the outside, but realized what kind of transformation needs to happen on the inside. So from that point forward, they started sending volunteers to the school and just taking on all sorts of different types of issues. They ended up having a church staff person that was asked if they wanted to actually have an office at the school to help them with things like clothing closet, food distribution, helping with just with different students. They have a whole, there are students that are parents and the needs for those young parents and how the church could help in those areas. And so now moving forward 7 years later, the relationship is just amazing between that church and school. They have just a beautiful relationship in partnership with one another, and that community has been transformed. The North Portland community has a level of pride in this school that is just amazing. The families that are stronger, their graduation rates increased by 15%, and just the sense of community around that school has been phenomenal. And so one of the, Jeff Martin is a congregant of South Lake, and he's also a movie producer and produced this story called Undivided. And this, if you've not seen the DVD, it is available. Let us know. We'd love to send you a copy. And it really tells the story well. It's about 60 minutes, and it really, it's very inspiring. It's a great tool to actually share with others about what can happen when a church adopts a school. So there's some resources on our website about that too. There's like a little 6-minute sizzle reel that casts that vision. So let us know. So foster care, most cities that I know of and most states have issues around foster care. It's sad. That's a sad piece of me thinking about. I mean, you think about we're commanded to take care of the widows and the orphans, and we have an issue with orphans in our right here in the United States and around the world. So out of Imago Dei, there was an initiative that started with one family who were foster parents, and they said, this is wrong, like, how do we make a bigger impact? And so they went to their pastor and said, we have an idea about taking care of the one DHS offices that we're familiar with. There's 9 of them throughout the Portland area. And they had an idea about what they called these welcome boxes. Think about like Operation Christmas Child, kind of similar concept of coming up with these boxes. So when a child, as they say, on the worst day of their life, they've been removed from their home, they're sitting in a government office, and they're listening to the caseworker call around to try to find a home for them. The idea was a box of activities and snacks and things that would be theirs. They could keep it, so they could actually have this box while the caseworker is looking for a placement home for them. So the hope was that there would be 300 of these boxes. Well, throughout the year, the word got out, churches got on board, and in Portland now, over 7,000 boxes have been completed. Every DHS office, all 9 of them, have a stockpile of these boxes. So anytime a child comes into the office, they get this box, and they can take it with them. It's theirs to keep then. And so when they're put into a home, they can take this box. It's really been beautiful. And this is a type of thing that can be replicated extremely easily. There's a whole model for it. It's, again, on our website, the CityServe PDX under the foster care tab. And what's happening with the relationship between the city, the state, and the churches around the foster care issue is unprecedented. We have the director for the, again, foster care system came up on May 1st at City Bible Church and was talking about how for 30 years that organization has not been, they did not have community partners. They felt like they could do it themselves, and they're acknowledging that they can't do it by themselves. It's not working. It's a failed system. we're failing our children, they need partners, and they want to welcome the church to be a partner. It was unbelievable listening to this, of saying, okay, you have a government official saying, we want to partner with the church, and hoping that the church shows up. And we're doing some great things, but ultimately we also want to have more foster homes, and that's our hope here in Portland. We have 884 children on the wait list. We hope that eventually the wait list would be 0, because there would be 884 new families waiting for a child instead of a child waiting for a family. Another thing that's happened here in Portland is around health and wellness clinics, that's, again, started with the festival and has just continued to grow. They are church collaborative efforts. A church in a community has to come together and say, yeah, we want to see this happen for our community. We worked with an organization that was birthed out of this called Compassion Connect. They actually have an entire model and a toolkit with everything you need to do a clinic that you can get from them. It's been phenomenal. So we actually have gone from doing these massive big clinics, which still happen, and now some of the neighborhoods and communities and smaller kind of outside areas are starting to think about what a mini clinic would look like, so they can actually serve people right in their own neighborhood, form relationship with these people that they're already in community with, and relationship and neighbors. So that just continues to just evolve, and again, it's really evolving relationship. Because in relationship, then we know we can actually share the gospel can be heard, and once it's heard, if it's in relationship, then those people can actually pour back into the local church. So that's a little bit about what's happening here in Portland, and now I'll have Jeff share about what's happening in Sacramento, because it's just as exciting to hear what's happening in Sacramento and lots of different areas. So thank you, Jeff. Oh, muted.
I think you're muted again.
Why did that happen?
Good.
It's the courtesy we all want to have for one another when we're on a conference call or webinar. So just super exciting, Cindy, to hear what you share that story. In fact, Kevin Plow was with us maybe 10 days ago sharing some of the same things, and it's inspiring to know that there are activities like this of exhibiting the gospel in profound ways happening throughout the United States. And so in at least 60 cities that we are aware of, that there are gospel movement activities taking on some of these major issues and allowing really followers of Jesus Christ to come into the center place or the center stage or the middle of these incredibly important issues that are affecting our cities. So you can see our 5 areas of emphasis that we're working on in Sacramento. We've worked on these with real focus for the last 2 years. We just finished our 3rd, what we call a season of service, which the first one we did led into a festival, and then we've done 2 since that time. And this year was really a breakthrough year for us, because we were able to exceed the number of churches that participated in the initial season of service in 2012. In fact, it blew away our goal. We were around 100 churches during the festival took part in season of service, and we did like a God-sized idea or God-sized goal this year of saying, let's see if we can see 150 participate, and that was kind of the impossible dream to grow by that much. But we ended up with 165 congregations participating. We had 52 what we call participating organizations, which are nonprofits or schools or civic partners that we work in cooperation with to address needs with compassion. 267 total projects, over 10,000 volunteers, and over 55,000 hours of service. And when the body is mobilized like that, when followers of Jesus are mobilized like that into one-time projects, then they can take on some of the things that Cindy was sharing in terms of what's happening in Portland for these intractable issues, where there's a 3-year initiative or a 5-year initiative, say like with the foster care system, where you're saying, let's see the waiting list go down to 0 from over 800. And what these seasons of service or serve days or serve projects do is shows people what those needs are and excites them about being an incarnational witness of Christ, doing what Jesus did, serving the way Jesus did in a city. So we've been very excited. But you'll notice on the screen that really for us it begins with prayer, promoting unified, persistent prayer. Whatever you can do to contribute to praying in communities for the existing churches to be a strong witness of Christ, for the station of the lost, for the different cultural spheres that influence the city, like government, the marketplace, education, etc., you can begin to see an incredible shift that takes place in cities. And what we're doing in Sacramento on this regard is something called GAP groups, Gospel Advancing Prayer Groups. And so we're identifying and putting together groups of prayers from different congregations in a community to pray for what I just shared with you, for the churches of that community, for the leaders of that community, for the spheres of cultural authority or influence in that city to be shifted into alignment with God's purpose for that city. And so that is just a thrill. So prayer and service, connecting leaders. We talked earlier about the idea of the importance of finding conveners who can help pull together leaders in different areas in a city for cooperative, collective impact. In Midtown, for instance, in Midtown Sacramento, we have a church that has had the premier summer Bible school, vacation Bible school kind of children's program for the summer. What they've done is they've invited half a dozen other congregations around them to work together with them for one gospel witness to children, and being able to see out of that a much greater impact on the children of that area, and allowing families to connect with a number of different churches that might suit their language needs or their cultural needs or the draw that they might have. It diversifies that and allows people to find a home within a church when their children are presented the gospel or taught the gospel through a summer Bible school, vacation Bible school type of program. Which brings us to gospel, saturating communities with the message of the gospel. That's really what we believe through neighboring initiatives, through unified collective impact activities, like these summer camps for children. A lot of our churches are beginning to do unified youth camps, recognizing that their students go to the same high school. What would happen when they go to camp together? How can they envision ministry on that high school or that junior high, middle school type of campus during the school year, both to bring the gospel as well as to be able to make disciples and build up disciples. We also are continuing to believe in event evangelism. Some of you may be familiar with a program that travels the United States called the 99, and it's a tent that's set up in the parking lot of a mall, and it's a live reality theater that shows the reality that 99 teens per day in America die from bad choices or their own or someone related to them, and it shows them the reality of our mortality and the reality of heaven and hell, and that can bring incredible fruit. We had, in our experience that we just hosted that, we had over 7,000 youth move through that exhibit, and we had over 1,400 pray that first prayer of salvation. And more exciting to me, because I'm working on collective impact of churches, we had 86 congregations send volunteers to participate in that. So in terms of an evangelist, I want to challenge you, how do you catalyze evangelism in your community or in your city? And it can be through an event like that. It can be through the collective impact of a VBS, which always presents the gospel, through youth camps. What can you be doing to fuel, equip, challenge, raise the vision of all the followers of your city to be sharing the gospel in an active way? And finally, our multipliers value that we're working on is we recognize that there needs to be new ministry and new churches to create disciple-making movements and have the number of churches and the different kinds of churches based on language and culture that need to be able to reach the people in our city. So we're working on that. So within existing churches, they can start a new ministry or a new church within that church. For example, we have a community that has identifiably 550 households that speak Spanish as the primary language in their city. It's a city of about 70,000 people. That's a significant population, and currently of the 23 existing churches, there is one Catholic Mass per month in Spanish, but there, in the Protestant churches and in the evangelical churches, there's no weekly ministry in the Spanish language. So it's very obvious that we're getting right to it to offer and to have those who are passionate about bringing Spanish heart language, gospel, and Bible into those lives and having those new ministries that reach new people in an ongoing basis. So we're just getting started here in Sacramento. We're having a lot of fun finding people and helping people meet each other to go after this kind of gospel movement in Sacramento. Cindy, you want to do some Q&A?
Sounds great. Thanks, Jeff, so much. That's so exciting to hear. One of the questions that came in, that comes in almost with all the webinars is, okay, I'm not Palau, I don't have the organization, the size, the funding. It's mostly NJ Evangelist, and I'm rephrasing the question because we get it. It's a common question. It's good. So scale this down, and it's just Luis or Kevin and a part-time volunteer or something like that. This is very overwhelming, but yet, where do I start? Do I just, of course I would say pray and what's God leading, what's going on in the city, but Cindy and Jeff, just, bring this really down to the bottom shelf level, for the small team with limited to no funding, and where do they go? You've addressed it a little bit, but let's be clear again.
Yeah, let me jump in first on this, Cindy, because I think that there's just some easy things you can do. Number one, in everything you do, be a friend to the local church. And that means that actually, even though you don't have a lot of money or resources, what you can do is you can become an expert on the city in which you live or the community in which you live. And if you're in a very large area, you might need to hone that down to neighborhoods or districts or however your city kind of the down population that's maybe 25,000 to 100,000 people, and then become an expert in that area. What is the ecosystem of that community? Where is the power in that community? Who are the lost in that community? Do some simple demographic research by going on zipcode.com or neighborhoods.com. Some of the actually the real estate websites can give you all kinds of information. Put together a little report. It'll take you literally half a day on who lives in the city, because pastors are too busy to do this or they're caught up in their church life. As an evangelist, you can go make an appointment with a pastor and bring that kind of information, saying, this is who's living in our city. I know your church is doing really well, or whatever you want to say to them, but here is the population of our city, and many of them don't yet know Jesus. How can we work together to be able to, how can I encourage you or work with your congregation on your evangelistic efforts, and just to stir up that evangelist spirit within existing congregations. And that's something anybody can do. You can do it in your bivocational. It's your ministry that you do 10 hours a week, even while you're working a full-time job. And I'm telling you, because I did it for a season, for about 2 years between 2002 and 2004. And it works. Pastors listen. They're very appreciative. When you bring something to give to them, no strings attached, just saying, I want your church to be better at evangelism. Cindy?
That's good.
Yeah, I think also, that is exactly right. I think that most church leaders that I know are some of the busiest people around and are pretty overwhelmed. I mean, frankly, they have a lot of plates in the air and demand their time and a lot of expectations about what they are supposed to be doing and not doing. So it really, in order to I think, build that relationship. You can't go in demanding something. You know, that's the last thing they really want is somebody else that wants to sit down with them and ask for something. And so, again, it's kind of going in and actually just learning. Like, what is your church already doing? How's that working? What are you frustrated by? What are you excited about? What's God doing? And so I think just really sitting down and having that, not going in with this like, oh, I'm going to go in and ask for something. It's more like I'm going to go in and I'm going to learn something. And so I think that's a really important stance to just really, like you said, Jeff, kind of get the information about the lay of the land for a city, not only just from the demographic side. I mean, even the Chamber of Commerce can give you some great demographic information. The U.S. Census information that you can pull up, there's some great demographic information. So arming yourself with that information ahead of time is actually great because, like you said, a lot of churches don't even know that information where they are. They don't have the time. That's not what they're doing. And it might be right where they're planted. So actually, that's some information that they might find helpful, and actually appreciate the fact that you actually have taken the time to get to know where they are and their community. So that does help. And asking how you can be praying for them. I mean, that's just a very simple, like, how can I pray for you? How can I pray for your city? How can I pray for your people? How can I pray for you? So it's a really important piece of just, you know, building that relationship and letting them know that you care about them. So as we talk about friendship evangelism, this is like how to friendship relationship. You know, how do you build a relationship? So
that's powerful, Cindy, because we hear that over and over again. Not only be a friend of the church, but be a friend of the pastor. Carry the pastor's torch.
Yeah, they carry a burden. They carry a burden. I think it's a really, really tough role. So
that's great. And just as a reminder, click that chat. The chat window on your webinar is a plus signal. Click that to a minus, and you'll see where you can post questions to keep dialoguing. But another question just came in. Can this model be replicated overseas, maybe in communities not our own? I know we've done that around the world, but Cindy or Jeff, you want to address how you do this overseas?
Well, I can share a very practical example and very cool. This is going to plug when our webinar is recorded, but the World Cup happens to be happening right now in Brazil. So I was in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and working with ministry there in the favelas, and this very same model can be applied within any community, even the poorest community, to be able to go after the idea that there are specific needs, and a lot of times if you're in a developing area, you're going to be able to identify those needs very quickly and then become an expert on that and find a way to rally resources to begin to show measurable change. And I would like to say that as you get involved in that, you're going to be rubbing shoulders with the people very naturally. You know, you think of 1 Peter, which is a scripture that we all know, where, you know, be ready to give an answer to those who ask hope within you. Well, it's because you've set apart Christ as Lord in your heart. You're living where Lord Jesus Christ is leading you in your life. And when you've done that, there are going to be people as you rub shoulders out there who say, why are you doing this? Mm-hmm. And that's where you present the gospel. And that can happen in a very impoverished situation like the favelas of Brazil, or my friend who does ministry in Western Europe. You know, how does Christianity gain a voice there again in Western Europe? It's going to happen those who are motivated by love and by compassion and realizing that God is God and He's created all human beings to reflect His image, and there's sin which needs to be forgiven, but going out and meeting those practical needs and engaging with gospel activity in that way, breaking down the resistance that has built over time within those contexts. I've got all kinds of examples we don't have time for, but you can apply these principles directly within that context.
That's great, Jeff. Thank you so much, because it sounds like building trust, building relationship, and then getting to do later on down the road what all the evangelists want to do, and that's proclaim the gospel to as many people as possible. So that's really great. Well, we do have about 2 more minutes. Let's see if there's any more questions. Or
So actually, one of the things around on the international side that I would say, we actually do have some gospel movement stories that we've shared on the gospelmovements.org website. And there's one in Australia that's really inspiring, one in England. We've had the opportunity to meet some of these city leaders from around the world, and there are some international things happening, and it's very exciting. Yeah, so that's a great place to, if we're trying to post some of those stories and help you learn more about, different gospel movements that are happening not only here in the U.S. but around the world. So.
And you also see axonline.net is there as well. And then, Cindy, do you want to wrap up this final slide?
Sure. And Jeff, you can jump in too. Jeff and I both had the privilege of being at Movement Day the last 3 years. Tim Keller has been the keynote speaker there, and it's hosted in New York City. Tim really has a heart about city transformation, has some great information, has written a book that I highly recommend called Center Church. There's actually some talks from Tim that are posted on the Movement Day website, and I've put a link up here, it's a great talk. That first one with the link, it's about a 30-minute talk, and Jeff, you just actually had reminded us about that talk, and it's fantastic. So a couple other books that are listed on there if you're really wanting to learn more about kind of the whole city transformation conversation and what's happening, and people that have been living and breathing and doing this for many years and are kind of experts in this area and have written books. One book that I didn't put on there, though, and when you were talking, Jeff, it kind of struck a chord of thinking that When Helping Hurts is a book that would be a really highly recommended read about, being able to, go in and especially in North America, we do want to do that kind of a constant hand out of material goods, and we know, and we're really recognizing, and I'm sure as evangelists you'll love this, is that we have to address the spiritual needs, not just the physical needs, and sometimes we can do more harm than good. Jeff?
That's great. Yeah, and I would just recommend getting to the Movement Day website and watching Tim Keller's talk from the Movement Day 2013 on the tension between organization and movement. It's very helpful.
Excellent. Well, this entire, we're a little bit after the hour, so we want to land the plane, so to speak. This webinar in its entirety will be posted to the website. So again, go spend some time on the website, not just with resources, but all the different collaborative events happening, as well as the conferences where we can gather together, continue conversations like this as well. If you have any follow-up questions or thoughts or comments, please email us, either email Amy or myself, and we'll do the best we can to field that. One final question, maybe if Cindy and Jeff, if you want to hang around for a minute, maybe you could address it. In regards to convening leaders, how do you paint the picture of what collaboration really looks like, and what is the benefit for them, kind of what's the selling point? And Cindy has a great form, it's called What a Partner Looks Like, that will get posted to the site. But Cindy or Jeff, maybe in 30 seconds or 60 seconds, do you want to hit that?
Jeff?
Well, go ahead, Cindy.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, you go. No, you go.
Yeah, that's a kind of a tough one to answer in a really quick, short period of time. I think that, being a convener is really a gifting. Not everybody is a convener, and being able to share that vision. There is actually a model out there, and I'll just talk about this really quickly, called Collective Impact. And if you look up the Collective Impact model, just Google it. It gives you what the end looks like, so I'd recommend reading up on that, and that might give you some vision about what that looks like what it looks like to bring a group together and cast vision.
Yeah, and that's out of Stanford, outstanding academic research. And then you can always pull the spiritual card and, look at what Jesus' model was to bring the gospel to the villages of Judea. And I want to recommend this to you, too, as an evangelist. You need to have someone alongside you. And Jesus' model was to send those disciples out 2 by 2. And it was the model of partnership. 2 are better than 1. Ecclesiastes 4:9 and following, and all kinds of models in Scripture is always about doing it together. Because when we do it together, we reflect the relational nature of God, and we reflect His image on the earth. We're not called to do it alone. We're called to do it together. And that's why I love being friends with Cindy, Kevin, the Plow Association, and make friendship circles, both wider that encourage you, but also very local to find those kindred spirits, the common heart and vision together for collective impact.
That's great.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jeff. And I'll just underscore NJ Partners. I think this is all great stuff, so let's chew on it some more another time. And I would also just say start in your city. And some of the things that Jeff and Cindy have said about, I think the selling point is go to the pastors and the leaders of organizations in your city and say what you need. It's a little different approach of a towel over your arm with a bowl of water and saying, you know, what feet need to be washed, metaphorically speaking. So anyway, thank you everybody for being on the call. We want to thank especially Jeff Kreiser, Executive Director of ACTS Group in Sacramento, for blessing us and taking time today, as well as Cindy Kirk, our VP and Director of City Serve here at the Palau team. Well, Lord bless you greatly. And again, any questions or concerns or comments anytime, get a hold of us here at the Palau team. And thanks for being on.